Hi everyone. I'm working on a Cambodian ruin for Deep in the Jungle for our new Crucible Black Sun project, Weird War Nam. So I need a ruined Cambodian city deep in the jungle. And I'm starting with an old piece of aquarium store model that I've had for many years, and I managed to break at some point, so it actually was two pieces. And I'm going to use that to my advantage by shifting it slightly when I've re-glued it down here, so that it looks like it's come through an earthquake or something like that. It just adds to the character of the model. So far, all I've really done is hot glue the model down to the styrofoam base, and I've used styrofoam rubble to fill in the interior so it doesn't look hollow, because that's not going to look too effective. And now I'm adding wall pieces in more styrofoam, and I'm going to use this architectural styrofoam that I've had for many years to do the brickwork. That looks, try to match it to the stonework that's already on the existing model. So after that, I'm planning on doing jungle, growing it up and around it, and hopefully I want to do some sort of big tree like a banyan fig or something that will grow up and through and have roots and pieces that will give the model some character. But right now, my main task is going to be to use the white glue at this point and just start adding rubble to the bottom of the walls, and then adding stone surfacing to some of these flat areas.
To do a little bit of detail work on the Cambodian lost city. I'm still working on the styrofoam wall sections and rubble piles. But right now, what I want to do is carry on carving some of this base so that it can just sit on the table and you don't have to blend it in with anything. It's going to look like it's a stone platform that this other piece from the aquarium store was built onto. And so what I'm doing is carving some of the, just a suggestion of stonework on the flat surface, because we're going to be painting this and then flocking it to some degree, and we just want to look like there's stone that's got moss and grass and things growing on it. And then I'm also carving down into the sides to make it look rubbly, and blend it in with hopefully the similar look to the stonework of the aquarium store model. And as I go, I'm often cutting little blocks out. They pretty much immediately get glued onto the rubble piles as I go. So any of the rubble I'm carving away is getting added to other areas that look like they could use more detail as well. So I end up with a lot of little square shapes or broken rocky shapes, and build them into the existing piles to give them a little more detail. So one of the things you got to always bear in mind when what you're doing here is not building an accurate model, because this is a gaming piece. What you're really engaging in is is a form of set design. You want to create a stage for the figures to act on, and you want to make sure that the detail-oriented areas of your model stay a bit self-contained, stay a bit just as a a visual display, but allowing a lot of open space around. So every brick and stone I add to this, I'm keeping myself within a perimeter and not letting it kind of get sloppy and flow out too much, uh, if that makes any sense. So the main idea with the rubble here is to just blend the base of this model into this base here. Get it all kind of looking similar and like it belongs together, so that hopefully you're not going to look at it when it's finished and think, oh, well, that's a nice piece of styrofoam. So as I go, I'm just cutting little pieces here out in roughly 90-degree lines, so it looks like a suggestion of stonework. So anyhow, that's where I'm at right now. This is going to take a while because I got to go all the way around the edge and carve lots of like little details. And I'm also taking the opportunity to kind of round this edge of the model off a bit, because in use it's going to get battered. It's going to get transported and it's going to get bumped and dinged. So I want to start it out looking kind of bumped and dinged to begin with. That way it's not going to be a tragedy when something happens to it, which it inevitably will. Cambodian Lost City for our Black Sun Weird War Nam project. And I think I'm just about done with the foam end of this project. I've gone over a lot of the edges so that it can just sit on the table and look like more stonework and ruins coming up from the playing surface. And I've been carving into the surface first with the scalpel and then using a pencil to basically draw the finest, just suggestions of stonework. Don't have to draw every single stone, you just need to kind of imply that there's a stone surface, because we're going to eventually put flocking down on much of the flat areas and just let the stone kind of show through. So the final kind of stage of that is using the tinfoil ball to kind of roll around on the surface and give a little more stone texture to where we want the figures to be playing. Just gives it a little more character. You can also use it to roll along the edges so that the edges aren't as sharp. This side's pretty much all done over here. I've carved in some steps and made them suitably ruinous looking. And now, I've got a few things to think about. I'm thinking I'm going to gesso the model, because I actually want to spray it with some carefully chosen colors, and I don't really want to brush them all on, but yet here we are with foam surface, and if you use spray paint on foam, it's just going to dissolve and all our work will be for nothing. So I'm thinking about how to apply the gesso here, and I also am concerned that if I brush it on, it'll get too thick, fill in a bit too much of the stonework. So I'm not sure if I'm going to do that. I'm kind of considering going and getting spray gesso from the art store so that I could just spray it all, and then I could use the like Tester's spray paints to start giving it its base coat colors. So I'm thinking about that, and I'm also thinking about how to do my tree, because I want this tree to kind of grow out of right here, big roots,
traveling in lots of directions, and then up and over and around the ruins, so that when we highlight the faces on the ruin, they'll stand through the foliage and look kind of much more impressive. So at first I was kind of thinking of using this old route that I found when I was hiking. But it's, as neat as it looks, it's very fragile, and it's not going to be great for taking places or for games, or even if I have to ship this model someplace. So I'm thinking I'm going to have to build a tree, which is not going to be a real simple proposition. It's probably going to have to be wire and foam and other things, but it's got to be fairly strong. So that's what I'm kind of getting ready to do now. So I'll let you know how we go from here. I've got a few decisions to make, but overall, the foam work, the carving and stuff is done. I've got a few more degrees down the road on our Cambodian Lost City for our Black Sun Weird Nom game that Lee wants me to mention that we're going to be putting on Kickstarter somewhere down the road. Not sure when. But anyway, the decision I made on the ruin at this point is that I decided to prime the main structures with watered down gesso. And that's going to be my starting point. But I think before I go too much further, I have to start on my tree, which is one of the big challenges for this particular model. The tree is basically just underway. I've used a bit of coat hanger and some fluorescent wire and other scraps of wire, and I'm just hot gluing it, kind of jamming it into the styrofoam and bending it and shaping it. And I've actually taken the top of this main coat hanger wire and run it up into the hole at the top of the model from the pet supply store, so that it will have two anchor points and give a lot more security for that. So I'm just going to basically carry on adding hot glue and building up kind of the root structures and the trunk. Hot glue's cheap and it dries pretty strong. I've got a little bit of foam in here jammed in the wires too to build up some heft and some structure. So this city is basically this Cambodian ruin city is, I should tell you a little more about Black Sun. Black Sun's kind of an alternative reality Vietnam era setting, but it's a bit like the weirdest parts of Apocalypse Now meets a bit of the premise of Lost TV show, where this is an alternate dimension. This is a part of the Cambodian city is actually part of the gateway to this alternate dimension, because there's a more ancient Lemurian city beneath it, left over from a really ancient past. So this is going to have to be a little bit suggestive of that sort of weird nature. So I want the trees and things to be a little sinister looking. So I'm going to, be making it twisted and a bit, contorted and strange looking. So here we are putting a bit more wire on. So it'll have a bit of a root structure down the back there. And let's just fasten her on. I decided not to do the spray gesso because I kind of basically just got lazy and didn't want to drive out to the art store right now. So I just watered down some gesso and brushed it on. I'm going to next want to, once this basic structure of the tree is made, I'm going to want to then do a basic coat of paint on the whole structure of the model. Once the gesso here is still drying a bit. And I'll be using just regular latex house paint that I got from the clearance table at the local Home Depot, because you can often find suitable, fairly neutral colors that give you a good place to start. So anyway, you can sort of see the basic of the tree and how, once you've glued it down, it gets pretty firm, and that's what we want for a gaming piece. We want it to be able to survive a bit of travel. So anyhow, that's where we're at for now. Keep watching, and hopefully we'll get this thing moving along fairly quickly. I don't know what I'm going to do for the foliage yet on the tree, but other than that, thanks for watching. Here we are on the Black Sun Cambodian Ruin model. This is the work I've managed to get done today. I've given it an undercoat of just this neutral colored, sandy colored latex house paint from the bargain bin at the Home Depot. And now I've been working on the tree, the banyan fig that I want to grow up and over. I'm also starting a couple of smaller trees, just using kind of green foliage from Michael's art store that I'm reinforcing with a bit of wire, and I'm using old green stuff, like almost expired green stuff that I can't use for sculpting anymore, and I'm just using it to attach the wires. So I'm going to want a couple of these trees to also be growing somewhere on the board. Give it a little variety, but this guy's going to be done with, hopefully, I'm thinking steel wool and then a leaf foliage that I've ordered off the internet, and it should be here hopefully in not too long a time. But in the meantime, now with the tree, I'm again using some of this old expired green stuff, which would never work for sculpting a figure, but is good enough to stick on some wire branches to the tree and give us a little heft. And I've already built up some of the roots with Aves epoxy sculpt, which is great stuff. It's a two-part epoxy, like the green stuff, but a lot cheaper. And it's a little bit water soluble when you're using it too, so you can actually, here it is, I've mixed some up here, and you can use water to smooth it a bit. So, and this one's almost dry, and then the previous layer, and then as you put it on, I'm just wetting my finger and smoothing this in to the roots. The banyan fig roots should be very prominent. They're really large, and they form really interesting shapes, so I'm hoping to kind of capture a bit of that. I'll probably still use gesso at the end of this and maybe some modeling paste to make it even smoother. But this tree is coming along pretty nice at this point. Again, I used hot glue and styrofoam for the main core of it, just to fill it in, because you don't want to use too, epoxy is still, the putties are still expensive, and you don't want to use too much of that, whereas hot glue from the dollar store is nice and inexpensive. So these branches are just getting added. And eventually, when I have enough, I'll put steel wool on it. And I'm going to use green foliage for this tree because in our Black Sun universe, the Cambodian ruin is on our side, is in our dimension. The Lemurian city beneath the Cambodian city, the buried city, is the gateway to the other dimension, where things get weirder. And I just wanted to also mention, while I'm doing this, I mean, it might seem like I've been doing this for days. Really, I'm only spending about an hour and a half a day on this project. Most of the time is being taken up with just letting the materials dry, letting the paint dry or the glue or whatever. And the actual build work, the time I'm down here working on this is maybe an hour and a half a day. Not too much. After all, we have work and other parts of our lives to deal with besides our models. So anyway, that's where we're at right now. Hopefully my foliage will arrive quickly, because I'd like to carry on with these videos and get this whole thing done so I can do the photo shoots. Here we are once more doing our Weird War Nam Cambodian ruin city for our Black Sun project, which will be going on Kickstarter at some point. Here is the tree that you were watching me do in the last video. This guy has been a world of pain because he's all wire. And the hot glue, I've still got blisters from working on with hot glue and foam. And now I'm just adding with my finger more modeling paste. This is artist modeling paste. It's like a thick gesso, and it's good for smoothing these branches out. And I just sort of wipe it on and try to fill the gaps. Otherwise, this guy is, all wire, and that can be a little painful as you're reaching in amongst the little sharp bits. But I need this tree to be strong because this thing might get shipped. If I were you and I wasn't going anywhere with it, I'd use something like this root. You can get tree root kind of shapes that are really pretty interesting, and they're fragile, but if it were not for my wanting to kind of make this as strong as possible, I would have gone that route. Good one. So I'm just sort of wiping this modeling paste on to smooth out the trunk, because banyan figs they have pretty smooth bark. The other trees are the plastic guys from Michael's Art Store, and I've added twine. I remember I wired in some support with green stuff and just florist wire, also from Michael's. And now I've wrapped twine around all the way up both main trunks so that it looks a little more natural. And then I'm going to hit it with watered down white glue, which should lock it in place, and I'll gesso and paint it. And these guys look pretty nice, and they're easy compared to this one. But this guy is almost ready. But it's going to take a while. I just ordered some leaf foliage from a hobby supply place on the internet, and I think that could be a while. I'm going to have to get other elements of this model done before I worry about putting foliage on this tree. This rest of the model has been undercoated with the house paint, and it's almost ready to, I'm getting ready to paint it for real, which means next up I'm going to be hitting it with washes, lots of washes, and that's going to take a while because each wash has to dry, and you can only do, you can't, you know, you got to lay a flat surface for the wash to settle in, so you can't do it all at once or it'll just drain off and pool at the bottom of the model. So I'll do this top surface first, and then I'll lay it flat, and I'll do the ground, and I'm going to use lots of different colors. I think I'm going to start with maybe some browny blacks, and then I'll probably add some greens and others, and just build up some interesting tones. And when those are all dry, that's when I'll go back onto it with like a dry brush and bring out the highlights. So this is your middle tone that's already on here. The washes will be the dark tones, and then the dry brush highlights will be a lighter version of this color. So that's where we're at now. We're up to our eyeballs in painting this model of the lost Cambodian city for our Black Sun project. And I spent the last day coming down to the basement and applying washes and letting them dry. And I've been using the various house paints in my collection to paint the tree. I found a nice kind of neutral gray, bluey, greeny sort of color, which is going to be a good undercoat for our banyan fig. And that's in the process of being painted. I'm going to highlight it afterwards with a much lighter tone. And I'm going to start painting the ends of the branches in a green, so that it'll blend into the foliage when I start applying that. We'll get to that later, but right now I'm just brushing on some of the original color that I used to paint most of the model. It's not been changed at all, but it's going over the washed areas and bringing up the top surfaces again. And I'm not really dry brushing. I wanted to make a point about that. I'm just using the wet paint and I'm lightly applying it, because the dry brushing, let's be honest, destroys a brush. And brushes are expensive. So this, if you're just careful, you don't need to resort to dry brushing all the time. Just a light touch is what's required. And I'm going to be going back into this again after I do this, and giving it some more washes. I think my next wash is going to be sort of a greeny tone, because jungle tends to have a lot of kind of moss and lichens and things that are growing on every surface. So a bit of green is not going to be out of place here. And as I'm doing the stonework on the base, I'm keeping my brush, I'm kind of keeping it at right angles to fit in with the stone shapes that I carved. And drew on with the pencil. So this helps accentuate the right degree, the right angles of the stonework. Though I'm not being very accurate about it, I'm just kind of brushing on lightly and rapidly. Bringing up the detail. And this process, the painting is going to be a while. My final coat is going to be this color that I'm applying now, but I'm going to lighten it with a lot of white and just touch the upper surfaces to bring the detail forward. It's very push and pull. The washes push, or push back the recessed detail, and the highlighting brings up, pulls forward the forward detail. And you might even be wondering why I painted the model, the original aquarium supply store model, but I wanted it all to blend in, to look the same. And matching something, even though the paint on the original model was pretty adequate, it just wasn't going to work as well as doing the whole thing all with the same tones. So this is where we're at, and the painting should be finished in a day or two. Again, I'm not going to spend all day doing this. I'm going to come and go. But after this, we should be getting ready to do the fun part. The part I think is fun, and that's going to be applying the jungle foliage, which will really start to make things pop. Hi everyone. I'm into the foliage process of the Cambodian Lost City for Black Sun. And I thought I would show you some of the things I'm doing. This is the side I've been working on. And it's still got a lot of work to do, but I'm using various materials to kind of bring it up and make it jungly. But first of all, I don't think I mentioned previously when I was making the washes, I wasn't using house paint for the washes. I'm actually using acrylic artist paints, the good quality stuff, because it's much finer pigment and it settles into the cracks more efficiently. I wouldn't actually use the house paint for fine work like that. The house paint's best for big surfaces and filling in gaps and stuff like that. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. So some of the things I've got going here, I wanted creepers growing down the stone of the ruin, and I'm using just torn shreds of lichen that around here you can actually collect in the woods, which is nice. So that's free. It needs to be soaked in a mixture of glycerin and water. I think the ratio is 2 parts glycerin, 1 part water, or it might be the other way around. You can look it up on the internet. It'll tell you how. I mean, it comes when you find it. It's quite dry and crispy usually, and or it could be damp for a while just from the moisture of being out in the forest, but it will harden and get dry. And the glycerin is basically what the hobby companies do to it to keep it soft for a longer period of time. So I tend to do that because it's, I get bags of the stuff from out in the woods and it's all free, other than the glycerin. I'm also doing clumps of grass, which is just this hobby store, I think it's a dyed fir, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm just cutting little clumps and dipping it in the white glue and adding it to various locations. I'm going to need the thicker white glue though. Some of the white glue I use is just that watered down stuff from
the hobby store, but you can also make your own depending on how ambitious you want to get. And I just basically clip off a little chunk, dip it in the white glue, and place it. And spread it out a bit. I'm using some of these little guys. They're little plant twig things with seeds on them that I found hiking as well. And they're nice and fine. And as long as you kind of install them in a place that's a bit protected, so that they're not getting handled in any way, they should be fine. So I'm gluing those in. They give a little detail. A lot of foliage, you want to not get too crazy with the varieties, because if you look at a natural environment, there's usually only a select few species growing, and they tend to make up, whatever environmental niche that area provides. They take it up. So here I've got the lichens on the rocks as playing as creepers. The little seed pods, the grass. I've added a little bit of green. You can see I've installed the trees now. So I had a little extra ends of the trees left over, and I put them over on this side as well, just as probably the same species starting to grow over here. I'm flocking a bit with the green on the stone, but I want the stone to kind of show through, so I'm being pretty light with the flocking. And I'm also adding, if you look inside, I want creepers kind of hanging down from the upper recesses of the temple, because you see that in the tropics quite a lot. Whenever there's a bit of a sheltered area, you'll see kind of these long strings. And I'm using bunch grass again from hiking. I'm just nipping off a little piece and dipping it in the glue and placing it up inside. It tends to just hang there until it dries. So that's where that's at. You can see the difference on the other side here that I haven't started on yet. But this is coming along. It's certainly not done yet, but getting close. So that's all for now. Here we are with, I think, part 9 of this build, and I think I've got to as far as I can go until the foliage arrives from where I ordered it. Everything else on the model of our Black Sun Weird War Nom Cambodian Ruin is done. But I need to do the foliage for the big banyan figs still. So I thought it's going to probably take another week for that foliage to arrive, it seems. And in the meantime, I thought some of you would be interested in more specifics about how these trees were made. There were a few questions about it, so I've done up a bit more of these trees in various stages to show you. So this is what I started with. Just basically a plastic shrubbery kind of thing from Michael's art store. They've got lots of different kinds, and you can use lots of different kinds to do this. But this particular one I found to be pretty neat. So it's what I use to make things like this.
this guy here. And I used a different type as well for making these smaller ones as well. Otherwise it's just mounted on a CD. So this is the starting point, this stuff. It's reasonably inexpensive, not horribly expensive. The next stage is getting some florist wire, also from Michael's. And I'm using old green stuff. You can use other things as well, I suppose. Maybe even some tapes or whatever, just to wire the stem, because it's not as stiff as you'd really want it to be. So this guy is got 3 pieces of florist wire run up, just one long piece, and then a couple shorter ones, and then bent into kind of a Christmas tree stand on the bottom. And that, has to be allowed to dry. And the next stage after that is wrapping the whole thing with twine, just regular dollar store twine. So you just basically tie it to the bottom and start gradually wrapping it up the trunk to seal off the plastic of the stem and the wire. And when you get to the top, you carefully work your way around some of the lower shrubbery. You use white glue to glue it in place. And it ends up, gives you a nice bark-like appearance. After that, I often take a little watered down white glue and I'll just paint the twine with that and let it dry, and that helps lock it in place. You can do that or you don't have to, really. The next step pretty much does that as well. That's just painting the stem with that house paint, that regular style house paint. Which definitely locks everything into place and stiffens it nicely, and you end up with a pretty decent little tree. You've got to then, once the house paint's dry, stain it with some washes of browns and maybe a little green or a bit of black. Just give it that barky look. And after that, you could highlight it a bit, bring up some of the surface detail a bit. I haven't done that yet on this guy, but he's painted and he's ready to be installed. So I thought I'd show you that. I found another aquarium model that was vaguely Cambodian at the pet store last week, and I've made a smaller ruin to match the bigger one. Only it's not on a piece of styrofoam, it's just on a flat base. A bit of foam core, a bit of card, and some basically clothes hanger wire epoxied in around the edge to keep it from warping as you paint it, because anything thin base will warp. So we're going to install this guy right in here. Now that this thing is not quite finished yet, but it's good enough to put this in place. So we bend the wire enough to fit. And I'm going to jam it under one piece under there so that it's in place. And then I'm going to, hopefully my hot glue gun got nice and hot, and I'm going to zap her down. I might do this a couple times, different ways, but hot glue does a pretty darn good job of this particular part for strength, for long-term durability. Watch it doesn't tip while the glue is drying, just maybe steady it in a nice upright position. And you should be good to go. So hopefully that explains a little bit about doing up these guys. They're certainly an easy way to get a tree built, and a nice tropical, jungly tree. Hello! We're just about finished this model of our Cambodian ruin for our Black Sun Weird War Nam project. And Lee would roast me if I didn't tell you that the Kickstarter's starting on March 9th for the rules and more miniatures and some resin accessories. But this is the scratch build project that you've been following, and it's pretty much almost done. My foliage that I've been waiting for arrived. This stuff, it's called Super Leaf, and it comes in different colors, and it's a bit different than clump foliage that you get from Woodland Scenics. I tried Woodland Scenics last time I was doing a similar sort of tree situation, and it didn't work as well as I'd hoped. Whereas this stuff is actually working great. The trees, from the pictures I've seen of banyan figs, the trees actually have a fairly sparse light foliage, and that's coming through with the steel wool and the super leaf. So I've done this side, and I'm going to add a little more to it, I guess. It's not completely done. But I'm going to do a bit on this side and show you how it works. So let's clear the path. Now, what I'm using is steel wool. So just regular, straight up steel wool that you get in any supermarket. And you have to kind of pull it apart very gently, though, because I have had times when steel wool has, when you're pulling it apart, suddenly a piece goes taut and it just becomes like a knife edge, and it can cut you pretty bad. So be very gentle and use scissors to cut a piece off. Whatever you do, don't use a lot of strength pulling steel wool apart, because there's blood involved. So what I've done is I just took apart little pieces about that size, and then I sprayed them with I like Krylon spray paints, generally speaking. This is a paint and primer, and it works pretty good. It's just a green paint and primer, and I just hit the steel wool both sides with that, so it takes away some of the shiny that you don't want showing through on your tree branches. So we're going to put the leaves on these guys. They're going to get a little, freshen up the leaf material. And I've got the Woodland Scenics. I'm using the Woodland Scenics Scenic Cement, the light stuff that comes in a spray bottle. Usually the spray bottle only works for a little while, and then you end up with most of a container of the glue that you just have to pour out. I'm going to get a fresh spray bottle when I'm done this, and I'm going to gently spray all the leaves one more time now that once they're on the tree. So I'm basically just going to dunk the steel wool into the very thin white glue, basically, and lay it in here and cover it decently, flip it over and do it again. And you end up with a nice kind of it off a bit. You end up with a nice piece of kind of, oh, you know, you can see through it a bit, but it looks like kind of foliage up in the upper branches of a tree. So I'll do just one more here. This leaf stuff, I can't say enough about it. Lee told me about it, and so I ordered it from the website he showed me. It was Scenic Express was the name of the website. Again, just a nice light covering. And it took them about, because I'm in Canada, I had to fill out, I had to send them a little extra shipping money. It kind of cost me a week in shipping, but I think in the States you'd probably see the stuff arriving inside of a week, probably just 2 days, 2 or 3 days anyway. So that's kind of how I applied it. I've got some pieces here that are already prepared. They're dry. You got to let this stuff dry. Give it a good couple hours. And then you can start gluing it on. And this part actually requires another type of glue. You got to use epoxy for this. Epoxy will give you the strongest bond, most permanent bond. A white glue would not really work very well attaching foliage to these branches that, as you recall, were made of wire with Abe's epoxy sculpt, basically. They've been painted. So basically 5-minute epoxy. I love these containers. Instead of the tube, you know, the double squeeze tube, which seldom works very well, or the little tubes, also kind of a pain, because you end up, by the time you're halfway through them, there's epoxy everywhere. Whereas these are real easy to use, and they stay pretty clean. You don't end up with a huge sticky mess that you usually do with other epoxy sets. It's 5-minute epoxy, so I start with the lower branches first, because they're going to be harder to get to when you get the stuff on the top branches. And you just basically give it a good coat of epoxy and choose a piece that looks like it'll be suitable and slide it on and pull it up over the metal wire, so that the wire impales the steel wool, and then the epoxy will lock it in place eventually, but it'll also be held in place by the wire. Let's do this guy here. I'm going to be happy when I'm done with this tree. It's stabbed me more times than I can count at this point. However, it's looking good, and that's the important part. So, they'll have to go over this stuff afterwards, and there'll be little fine pieces of steel sticking out in odd directions that don't have any leaves on them. You can trim those off with a small pair of scissors. I've been going around and doing that a bit on some of these pieces. But that's basically how it works. And really pleased with this type of tree. I may actually make some standalone trees, smaller ones, not so huge, using this great stuff that Lee put me onto. So I think this is going to be it. All I'm going to do after this is maybe shoot some finished shots of the whole model. Maybe one or two, short little video pieces that are going to all be spliced into. We're going to take this whole session of building this model, and we're going to put it together in one full movie for our YouTube channel, and it'll finish off with hopefully some nice finished shots. So that's all for now. Thanks for watching. It's been fun doing this, and I'm going to think of some other projects to carry on with. I appreciate how many people have watched this, so thank you all, and we'll see you next time.